So I've had the urge for Star Wars stuff over the last few weeks, and I've gotten back into playing the Old Republic to supplement my needs. I made a new character, and I opted to make a Chiss, one of the, I would argue, most interesting species in the entire galaxy. Like, out of every species in Star Wars, Legends or not, they are probably my favorite. But the thing about the Chiss is that they are really mysterious, elusive, and unknown. For better or worse, they are one of the most mysterious things in Star Wars, with most details about them being scarce and really only deriving from Grand Admiral Thrawn, one of the most recognizable characters in Star Wars. And so, because of that, today we are going to talk about them. Today we ask and answer, who exactly are the Chiss? So the Chiss are a near-human species with iconic blue skin and red eyes that hail from the planet Scylla in the unknown regions of the Star Wars galaxy. To give some context on the origins of the species, the Chiss were originally created for the novel Heir to the Empire, a book that originally chronicled the events of the galaxy post-Return of the Jedi. If you have not read Heir to the Empire or any of the books in the Thrawn trilogy, you probably should. Despite the fact that they are no longer canon in Star Wars, they are still really, really good. And before Disney purchased Lucasfilms and decanonized everything, they were considered the true sequels to the original 3 movies, and probably still are by many to this day. But going back to the Chiss, like I said, the Chiss live in the unknown regions of space. I'll put up a map so you can see what I'm talking about. And this is where they have established a government that supports strength and loyalty over free will, democracy, and most of whatever makes up the Galactic Republic. And this type of rule, this type of government, is simply due to where they live. The unknown regions, known as the Chaos to the Chiss, is infamous for being wild, unpredictable, and difficult to navigate. And usually, if one lives in a violent land, that person or thing tends to become more rugged, self-reliant, and fiercely loyal to those who they might have the fortune of calling friend. That is exactly the Chiss and their society. A wild, dangerous space calls for a government that will fit it, and so the Chiss are governed by a strict autocratic oligarchy that's more aligned with the imperial ideology than that of the republics. To give you the rundown of how their government is organized, the Chis Empire, known as the Chis Ascendancy, is comprised of interconnected sovereignties dictated by 9 distinct noble houses named the Aristocra. These 9 houses were essentially the bodies that brought together the different parts of Chiss society and unified the species under one ruling body, the Syndicure. You can kind of imagine it like the United States, for example. We have the local state governments that can make their own jurisdictions, and then you have the overarching federal government, which has the ultimate say. The families that make up the Aristocra are like the California or the Florida state governments. They are capable of making their own independent rules, while the actual Syndicure is like Washington, D.C. and the branches of the federal government. So, let's say 2 families of the Aristocra, they might have different laws, different ideas on how to govern, but they all collectively fall under the jurisdiction of the Syndicure. It's complicated, probably a little more in-depth politically than most might like, but it's important to understand the Chiss government if you're to understand their impact on the galaxy and their society as a whole. So because of how they live, because of how they govern themselves, the Chiss are very isolationist and very independent. They have little interest in involving themselves with the affairs of anyone outside of their own kind unless there is something to gain. And so, because the Chiss are so isolationist in nature, they are almost a complete myth to the wider galaxy, meaning there is probably lots of misinformation about them and their society, if any info at all. In fact, So little is known about the Chiss that they are actually easily mistaken for Pantorans, another similar blue-skinned species. That should really tell you everything you need to know about their presence at the galactic table, but that's not to say they don't have an influence over it, because they do. You see, the Chiss are renowned for their spycraft and their subterfuge, which they use to their fullest extent to ensure the safety and prosperity of the Ascendancy. For example, when a mysterious enemy threatened the ways of the Chiss, Grand Admiral Thrawn, just Thrawn at the time, was chosen to infiltrate the Galactic Empire and ensure that they would be the first and only ally of the Ascendancy, or to weaken the Empire enough to shift the enemy's focus onto them and not the Chiss. So if you ever wondered why there aren't more Chiss running around, well, maybe there are and you just don't know about it. And that's all fine and dandy. Subterfuge and spycraft in a society, those are great. Strength, loyalty over everything else, it's nice. But what about the Chiss and the Force? Since they are so disconnected from the galaxy as a whole, does that mean they have their own Jedi orders or something similar to it? Well, to put a relatively cool concept to bed, no. The Chiss are really not Force sensitive at all, at least not in the way the rest of the galaxy is. You see, Force sensitivity, known as the sight to the Chiss, was very rare and only ever manifested in a limited capacity, and those who possessed this sight were almost always female. And because of their unique abilities, especially in the powers of telepathy and precognition, the Ascendancy would locate, train, and position these women of import as navigators for their fleets to move between planets unharmed. Now, it has to be said that because the balance of power in the Ascendancy is so fragile, the powers of the Force of the sight were kept as a closely guarded secret from the populace to deter any sort of power struggle if one gifted with the sight tries to take control of the Chiss Empire. Basically meaning that Force sensitivity was almost frowned upon, and if you had any unique abilities, you were probably a freak. And because of this, there have probably been millions of Force-sensitive Chiss that probably went undetected, if not snatched up by the Ascendancy. So, sorry, Force-sensitive Chiss. According to your own government, you just don't exist. If you have any questions or comments about this video, Star Wars, or its lore, you can leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll be sure to read each and every one of them. Thanks for watching.